Back. We are back with the next COVID cabal. Hello, hello, hello. Hello, hello. How are you? Hello, hello, hello. A lot of people very excited about this one. A lot of people very excited about this one. I don't even think people know. People didn't know maybe until this title what I was going to even go on and talk about. We got some very interesting stuff coming down the pipeline. Very, very interesting stuff coming down the pipeline. Share it right now. Share it. Share the COVID cabal right now. Get the crew on it. We'll start getting into this once we cross 20 live. What has been going on? What's been going on for people? Drop some comments in the chat. If you're here, drop some comments in the chat. Drop some comments in the chat. What is up? What is up, people? Drop the comments in the chat. Like and share this. Let's get people watching. Well, no, I was gone all weekend. Jose, I was gone all weekend. As I said, I was gone all weekend. So a while for you guys now. You guys are like ravenous for the COVID cabals. You know, before we were doing ones once a month. Once a week now, probably. Once a week. Yeah. COVID cabal every day, right? Oh my God, I hope not. I hope not. As much as I love you guys, I think I get overwhelmed by that. Get overwhelmed having to watch that. Do that every single day. That was, I swear, I started losing my hair once I started to do COVID cabals every day. That was when it really started to hit in earnest. Sammy, I did not see that new photo of Zelensky recently, a girl staying over him. I didn't see it. What is what's the deal with that? What's the intel we have on that? What does that mean? There's been a lot of stuff coming out recently, and I want to caution people about before we really get into this. Um, Send me it via DM on Twitter. Let me know when you send it via DM, and I'll check my DM real quick for it to see. There's been so much stuff coming out, so much stuff coming out. It's and look, one of the things, if there's one thing that I've learned, I think that we should learn from all this stuff, is that whenever they're hyping a day, whenever they're saying something's going to happen on a certain day, it's never going to happen on that day. It's never going to happen. Not to say that that date may not have significance behind the scenes, but don't expect anything to happen on the surface. So sometimes you have these like little viral reports of, these things are people are going to go viral. They're going to drop everything on March 20th. This never happens. Just never. It never ever happens. Ever happens. So there's no reason to get excited about it. All right. First off, if you guys watched the prior show, you know what we were doing here. We got Etna Bianco and Etna Rosso. Very, very nice. Very nice. So, cheers. Cheers, my friends. But this is what I want to talk about today. So, we'll give a brief war update. Nothing terribly interesting has changed on the front. Well, I've been on Twitch since probably September or October. Yeah, I've been on Twitch for a long time now. Maybe even August, but I think it was September is when we switched over. Yeah, EBS, right? So the main thing I want to cover, I'll just do a little brief war update first. There hasn't been massive changes to the front, nothing too crazy. Um, Mariupol continues to be gradually taken over by the Russians, who are doing micro encirclements within the encircled town itself, dividing it into 4 quarters from what I saw. Um, we also see an operational encirclement in the Donbass and what is effectively, as Financial Times noted recently, a meat grinder going on where the Ukrainian forces are just really getting hit brutally. Their defenses are getting hit brutally. And it seems like the Russians, for the most part, are, with the exception of Mariupol, they are moving forward gingerly as the defenses are really taken out in the area. Meanwhile, they continue to leave openings in Kiev and in Kharkov for civilians to be leaving the cities. So they don't completely surround it. And from what I understand in Kharkov, from Gonzalo Lira, right, rather, who's on the ground in Kharkov, from what I understand, that they've allowed, in particular, the northwestern section where the train station is, so that civilians can continue to get out of the city. His claim is that Kharkov is 90% empty right now, and that he would expect that Kiev would be a comparable amount higher, like above 50% empty at this point, maybe pushing 75%. So, of course, this plan, this intention, is all for to allow civilians to leave so that they're not going to get hit in the crossfire. More and more reports, it's starting to leak out even into Western press. The Western press is having a harder and harder time of trying to create this narrative of, the noble Ukrainians, which, by the way, regular Ukrainian army, I'm sure there's a mixed bag with it. But the Russians, interestingly enough, have been focusing their propaganda on the Azov people, and that suggests that they're trying to not incriminate the standard Ukrainian forces, even though, that cluster bomb in the Donbass came from them, not from Azov. So it seems like their intention is to minimize the acrimony, right, between the Russians and the Ukrainians, and focusing on the Azov people as the sort of scapegoat, which is not unreasonable. And then, of course, more and more reports coming out about war crimes, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We had the hypersonic missile hit Western Ukraine. I can't remember if we talked about that last time, if it already happened. But, it seems like the days are now starting to blur together. So where we're at in the war right now is that Russia seems to be showing off more and more of their firepower. And there was another mercenary barracks that was hit outside of Zhytomyr, and the message seems to be pushed towards the West that you don't want to come over here, because if you come over here, things are going to get really bad. Now, there's a lot of rumors that after this encirclement in the Donbass is finished, that there's going to be an advance from Belarus towards the rest of Ukraine. And to be honest, while I don't necessarily believe this specific report as being accurate, I do think it's somewhat of an inevitability at this point. I really do not think, given how things have escalated and how they look to continue to escalate, that the Russians aren't going to take anything besides the full of the country. At the very least, to neutralize it, because think about it. If you were to leave Galicia, if you were to leave the Lviv area and not enter into it, what would happen? I mean, it was just going to get pumped with NATO weapons, and there would continue to be provocations. They would also make it much more difficult for things across the border in terms of propaganda, etc. Not that they couldn't do it anyway from the Western countries, but there would be a constant source of provocation. That country, you'd have to go back into it anyway. It seems like you are going to want to just finish the job. And the one thing I can also say is that when it comes to this western area of Ukraine, everybody talking about how this area of Ukraine is obviously far more anti-Russian, and that it's going to be a much more difficult situation for the Russians to go there rather than their current location. All of that's completely true. I'm not here to dismiss that. My point is more that I think when push comes to shove, the Ukrainians that area are just going to leave. If Western countries are going to let them come in, they're just going to go. And so right now, I think we already have 10 million Ukrainians displaced. Now, of course, that's not all external, but that is at least external and internally displaced. And if the Russians were to move west, you could certainly see that number, which would be almost, would be like 30% of the population of Ukraine, right? Leaving. Substantial, absolutely substantial number of people. And it's unclear. I do think many will come back at the conclusion of the war, but it's unclear how many. Is only half going to come back, 3/4? I mean, I would be surprised if 25% ever came back, right? So, and when they were to come back, they would come back knowing that they weren't going to fight. So the point of this stuff is that I don't personally expect that there's going to be as much resistance as people think, even in the Western areas. Because if the Ukrainian army is completely destroyed, then there's not going to be as much hope. Now, here's the thing, though. Is there going to be some sort of Western provocation? I think we all think that that's a high possibility. There's some leak reports about the Poles moving into Western Ukraine and trying to make a protectorate, and that this would basically be the Polish annexation of Western Ukraine. It sounds like a little bit of a LARPy theory to me. Not that I don't think the government itself would want to do it, but it seems, well, I don't know. I guess I just don't really know. But it seems to me very unlikely that the EU would allow a Polish annexation of the area, even though, of course, it would be called a protectorate rather than an annexation. But the reason I don't want to completely get rid of it out of hand is because they're always looking for some means of expanding this war. And I do believe that that's coming. But here's something I think is going to happen first. So the stuff with the laptop is coming out with Biden, right? Hunter Biden, Joe Biden. It's now fairly confirmed that that they had business dealings with some of these biolab company in Ukraine. My suspicion is that Russia has all of it, and they'll drop it. They're not going to drop it in like a leak drip. They're going to drop it all at once when they decide it's appropriate to do it. So where we're looking with this whole thing is that I think you have to ask yourself these kind of questions, okay? So we've known about this laptop since October 2020, right? Since October 2020, we've known about this laptop. New York Post had a whole thing on it. The New York Post got suspended from Twitter. So why is now the New York Times talking about the issues with Biden's laptop? Those of you who have been following the COVID cabal, like the true believers of the COVID cabal, all through the fall, remember it was either in December or November, maybe January, that we talked about how they were going to remove not only Biden, but Harris, because Harris has her own problems not being a natural-born U.S. citizen, and that's known by both left and right on the insider circles. So that would leave Pelosi, right? That would be the gambit. And so what it seems to me is that, is Biden becoming too much of a loose end here? On are they going to, because, if this corruption stuff comes out more and more, it's going to make it more and more difficult for the presidency to function. But you have to ask yourself, the New York Times is in on this whole thing. So if the New York Times is publishing these stories, the New York Times, they're trying to set it up for an impeachment and removal of Biden. And the reason for that would be to help to maybe cover all the stuff with the war, use him as a sacrificial lamb, about his corruption in Ukraine, but it doesn't excuse things. Because if the American public finds out the president had personal dealings in Ukraine, I mean, we already know this stuff, but, if it gets to be in normie land, it leaks out in the normie land, that's a big problem. Are they getting ahead of it? Have they decided that his his usefulness is used up? I think that we're starting to see the beginning of that, because there's no way that they would be leaking this stuff. There's no way they'd be talking about it in the New York Times as they're talking about it. Barr going after it. Some people are saying that Barr's like a secret white hat. I just don't really buy that stuff. I don't get good energy from him. Some of this too clever by half stuff, it's not that let me put it this way. It's not that I don't think that there can be these clever schemes that are complicated with double agents. It's that you always look at somebody's energy. I don't look at Bill Barr and I don't see good energy. I don't see it. Hey, maybe it's there, right? But I know his dad was pretty corrupt. And I don't think anybody who comes out against the election fraud is probably a good person. The reality is that Barr goes after Biden. It's because Barr, as a swamp creature, is doing what the swamp has decided, which is they're going to go attack him from all sides and remove him. They're going to get rid of him and they're going to put somebody else in who can run things, right? Maybe hope to give him a little bit of a bump, especially because in a war situation, they may very well believe accurately that Biden doesn't cast the best image. Now, I mean, I agree with above here. Harris is not looking any better, and Pelosi, I mean, I don't really feel too confident with her either. But I will say this: out of the three, Pelosi definitely has the strongest head on her shoulders. If we're going to be as realpolitik as possible, you guys know what I'm trying to say here. She's the most with it and the most experienced, even though she's not really with it compared to the other two. There's, and I think that's where they're going to try to put it. I think Pelosi's angling for it because there's not really anybody after her. That's the rest of the, yeah. They have this whole thing, right? They're going to try to put Hillary Clinton in. It's possible. Look, I mean, she said that she's not going to run anymore. Is it possible that they get rid of Biden, then they put in Harris and they put Clinton afterwards, and they get rid of Clinton, they get rid of Harris and they put in Clinton? Ascend, I do think it is a calm of some sort. Bill, Hillary, Psaki, and Klaus all get COVID. I do think it's Obama got it too. No, I 100% think it's a calm. I don't know what it means. I have no idea what it means. Absolutely no idea what it means. But I do think that we're going to see it go this direction. I mean, what's also interesting is that, and this, I don't know exactly how it's all related, but having this new Supreme Court justice, like Kajaksi Brown or whatever, that I don't know, how she was always letting pedophiles off with pretty much no sentencing at all, as little as she could get away with them. And look at the odds, right? That she was the judge for Pizzagate. I mean, pretty wild stuff. But actually, what it really tells us is that there's not as much of a, how do I put it? They're not as deep as we would like to think. In other words, there's not as many of them. As we've always feared. That's my perspective. The core group is very small. and then you have an expanded group that is heavily blackmailed, and then you have a light layer after that's lightly blackmailed. But the core group that's in all this stuff is not, absolutely not, a huge number of people. They don't have a deep bench, right, is what I'm trying to say. So you guys should feel positive about that. Jeff, yeah, I don't think that she's going to be installed. And, as Juan said, when this stuff gets reversed, it won't matter anyway, because anybody installed under fraud will get removed in the process. But look, what I want to say here is I do think things are going to get really crazy, and I think on an economic front, we're getting close to the frontier. I feel pretty strongly that we will see kinetic action by the end of the month or by early April, and that there is going to be more sanctions imposed. They just can't take a step backwards. They're going to keep going, and it's going to lead to the collapse of the West, but especially Europe. Europe is going to be really, really in a rough spot. So that's where I see things going, but I think that the big move now is the removal of Biden, and that's the main reason I wanted to jump on here, is that we're seeing all the tea leaves for it. It's the deep state pivot. They've used their Manchurian candidate for a long time. He served them well, but it's becoming harder and harder under these circumstances, with all the Ukraine connections that are specifically tied to him. So I think that they'll clean house, and it's part of the false awakening, right? False awakening, that they're going to make it seem to the public, oh yeah, we are dealing with this corruption. See, let's get rid of Biden, we'll move in someone like Pelosi instead. I don't think, of course, it's going to actually have that impact at all. I think it's probably more likely to mess up everything, right? Because then people are going to be like, well, Biden maybe wasn't legitimate, but you're more legitimate than Trump, to Pelosi, somebody who wasn't even on the ballot. I do think that there's going to be a lot of these questions in the American public. But they're running out of options, They're just going to do whatever they can possibly do, and that's the situation. Anon 141414. What's happening in April? Are we going to be able to fly from and out of Europe? I have no idea, man. I actually have no idea. I have absolutely no clue. I like to think, sure, just because it seems crazy to think about the flights being shut down. All that said, I don't know. I mean, if there's some sort of open conflict, where are they going to shut down air zones for reasons like that? I have no idea. I really can't tell you. I think that at this point in time, nobody can tell you. Nobody can tell you. I don't think you should be paranoid about it, but you should just be prepared. I mean, like, look, my wife's in Poland right now. We made this calculation that better for her to get over there now than later, because if things are escalating, we can probably squeeze through this week. I don't personally think anything is going to launch up until next week earliest, and more likely a little bit longer just because of the way things move. Jeff, as you're saying, meme stocks are running up today. That tells me market dump is coming soon. They don't have the liquidity to handle payouts. Well, Cliff's been saying that in the next few weeks, by the time we get to May, people are going to start walking off their jobs because the hyperinflation is going to hit such a huge point. And he's not even just talking about necessarily the 10% that's going up, that we are looking at, and he might be a little bit early with this, to be fair, but that there's going to be a real, the market's going to get all wonky, let's put it that way. I actually, my opinion is that in terms of trying to get things into secure investments, we're at the really finishing line here, and I would be surprised if you have more than a month or so to do that. Not that like it's going to be like a hard line and you never can after that, but I think that you can already start to see there's more of a decoupling with the crypto markets, the stocks. And I just, yeah, I think it's going to get wild. I think it's going to get wild. I really think it's going to get wild. Because the thing is, once it becomes apparent that the Western currencies have kind of self-owned themselves, like, and that people aren't buying them anymore, and this could happen very, very abruptly based on an outbreak of war. The rest of the world dumps dollars in the event of, like, NATO getting into war with Russia. You could very well have a situation where the currency plummets dramatically. So, I don't know. It's not financial advice. It's just, I do think that we're running out of the, an off-ramp that is not going to start to, there's going to start to be a rush. And I think that in the outcome of that, and, what happens in the fallout of it, is that there's going to be the push for the CBDCs and all the related stuff. And as Jeff is saying, right, there has been, so let me see here, also seeing foreign currency going off SWIFT and going to asset back, lots of fluctuation coming there as well. Yeah, and what I wanted to really say, I think crypto probably will dump as well, short term. But I think in the midterm, it's going to stabilize much more as it becomes clear that central banks are in a death spiral. And then the money printing will start to really shoot up to stabilize things. You have an economic dump, everything goes down, and then central bank has its response, and that's when I think you start to see crypto really shooting off. But the main thing here is that, well, I don't know. Yeah, I think we're nearing this inflection point where stuff is going to start to come really hard and fast, because there's not a lot of moves left on the board. And when there's not a lot of moves left on the board, there's not a lot of time to delay. Suddenly a bunch of pieces just start getting taken off, one after another after another. That's how I see it going. And they've been really pushing this idea of the net going down. And I don't know if that's going to actually happen, because they have a lot of risks to shutting off the net, because the internet is how they maintain the control apparatus. So imagine if that goes down, people start talking to each other, there's none of the control mechanisms. But, guys, it's just going to get really wild, is what I'm trying to say. It's going to get really wild. And this year is the year of demolition. We are about to see a massive demolition in the economy. And yeah, they're going to try to do the Great Reset. They're going to try to do it. There's no question about it. They're going to try to do it. Because even if they can't get it for the entire world, they're going to do it here. And they're going to hope that it affects the rest of the world enough, and that things get crazy enough. I mean, they're just, a way to look at it is that, and I think Michael St. Clair said this, is that they're in a chess game, they know they're losing, so their response is to flip the board over. They just want to trash as much as they possibly can on the way out. And 2023, good stuff coming in 2023. Although, let's be honest, this is a relative standpoint. It's a relative comment. 2023 is going to be another very crazy year for us. I just think that we will we're going to be in the rubble in 2023. But better to be in the rubble than to be in the building when it's collapsing. You know what I mean? Better to be like staying on the outside with the dust in the air. So anyway, guys, that's the main point here. The main thing I wanted to bring to your attention is that it looks like they're trying to remove Biden. It looks like they decided they've had enough. It's time to pull that card. And Jeff, you're right. I mean, they believe that enough of them can scurry out. In the main fight of the next decade, is going to be sniffing out these people, because they're going to keep trying to hide the ones who did this. A lot of them are going to be trying to hide, and we're going to be looking for them and bringing them to legal justice. That's the way it's going to be. That's how I think it's going to be, at least. So questions. You guys have any questions? Any questions, comments? I can tell you that I have had some crazy dreams over the equinox. Wild, deep, heavy dreams, sleeping for a really long amount of time. Just really, really insane, heavy things. Oh, when is the Cabal history series? Well, let me see. Do I have time tomorrow night? Maybe I'll do it tomorrow night. Let me see here. Ooh, maybe. I got calls quite late tomorrow night. We'll see. We'll see. Any good reading on the Khazarian Mafia? I don't personally have any good reading on it. It seems as if it's alluded to in multiple different sources, and you kind of have to read between the lines. There's no official history of it. Cliff High says it's referenced in the Codex Aurelianga, and also that it's in some older Chinese texts. They talk about it as a name stealers. I have looked at Khazaria in Wikipedia, which of course is nothing, right? But you can actually read between the lines quite a bit with certain things, and that's the stuff. Like, it's not like you can't figure out anything from history. It's just that if you don't know certain things not mentioned, then the history doesn't really make perfect sense. But you could accept it on face value. You could say, well, okay, I guess these groups had an issue, but you don't really have a convincing reason why they did have an issue or why they did certain things, but you're just kind of accepting it as rote. But when you have that understanding, like, oh, this is what that group was all about, you could even go and look at Wikipedia and you can say, okay, I understand all these events they're talking about much more. Why, the Kievan Rus was against this group and why they were fighting against them so heavily and why this was, everything makes a lot more sense filtered through those lenses. It's the same thing with the Bank of the United States, right? In the issues between why were the Democratic Republicans and the Federalists in the United States, why do they have such a big fight over the first Bank of the United States? And you come to understand that it's arguable. I'm not actually sure I feel comfortable going this far with it, but it's arguable that the Federalists were infiltrators from the very beginning. Now, I think it's probably more fair to say that a lot of them, they wanted the independent United States too, but they had different, ideas of how it could be more protected. I don't want to cast any aspersions. I'll just say this. That Hamilton was a big supporter of the bank, and they made a musical after Hamilton. So maybe there's something to that. However, to be fair to Hamilton, huge part of the Constitution was basically, he helped to really construct it in a positive way. So I don't want to cast any aspersions. I think he probably had the best interest at heart. I think there's going to be wild riots all throughout spring and summer, especially the summer. I think the riots are going to get pretty insane. Let me check your questions here. I haven't been able to get out of bed as normal for a week or so. Much more tired, having crazy dreams too. Yep. Yeah, it's just been one of those, this is a heavy portal from what I understand. The 3 days around the equinox on both directions, this whole week with yesterday as a center point. is like 17th basically through the 26th, from what I understand. This sort of, I guess it's more like a 9-day window. It's quite intense. So, but not bad, just different. You know, it's always interesting to have these crazy dreams. The last time we had these crazy dreams was the 22nd, right, of February. So we're starting to feel these portals. So by summer, our nation could look totally different, just like 2020. I think this is correct. Yeah, I think that the biggest upheaval is yet to come. It's I would argue it's almost imminent. It's coming very, very soon, very, very soon, and it's going to hit very abruptly for people. I don't think that it's going to be as gentle as we've experienced. It's going to jar a lot of people. So, yeah, be prepared as best as you can. You know, I'm growing vegetables. I'm growing some vegetables in the garden. Not that I'm concerned about any of that stuff for myself, but I think it's probably as good a time as any to start doing it. Energy's been lower on wake up, fighting deep in REM cycles. Jeff, I really appreciate you saying that, because that's really the big thing. I've been sleeping longer, but the dream cycles have been like, you know, these deep, like, it's almost like a grogginess getting up. Not used to that. Not at all used to it. You guys can check out the Khazarian Mafia in the thread here. Let's see here. I never understood why so much hate on the Jews. Asked my AP Euro history teacher, just looked at me and said, that's always been the way. Hated the answer. Khazar history helped me understand. Yeah, and what's important to understand, just for the people who maybe don't understand the subtext of what Jose's saying, but it's actually not the Jews, right? It's this group that used the Jews as a shield. And so they were in between a bunch of Muslim and Christian countries, and they wanted to be able to infiltrate both of them. And so they adopted a neutral religion, so to speak, and they've hidden behind it, and they've operated behind it ever since. And so, and they've also been the ones who have killed the most Jews throughout history, right? Because they backed the Nazis. The Holocaust was very much a Khazarian thing. But the sacrifice of all those Jews was beneficial for them because it gave them more impunity. And this is actually a really good meta point for people, because when we understand that you can't, the average mind, the ordinary mind, is very, very consumed by labels. So you see this regular person like, well, he's a Republican. It doesn't matter that he's a Republican. It matters what kind of person he is, right? That's what matters. The label doesn't mean anything at all, right? John McCain's a Republican. John McCain was a piece of shit. Terrible person. Absolute criminal. Okay? So the point here is that you have a lot of individuals who start to go down the rabbit hole, and they can't see this nuance, and so they actually fall into a program for them to start hating Jews, and they look ridiculous. And also, they feed the wrong energy anyway. They're wrong. They look ridiculous, and they feed the wrong energy. It's not. That's not what it is. It's the specific group, and if you can't see past a label, you're not going to get it. I mean, and the reality is that, like, go and meet some Jews. Like, you know that they're not in on it. These individuals aren't in on it. I mean, look, is it possible that there's been some, cultural, what's the word I'm looking for? Compromising in some areas? Maybe, yeah. But I mean, a lot of Jews acknowledge this fully. It's not a matter of the people themselves. And, people are people. You got to read individuals as they're individuals. Doesn't matter what their skin color is. Doesn't matter what their religion is. Those are all dividers. And I say that not in the hacky way. I mean it literally. They're dividers. because it's divide and conquer. That's how it's always been. Liberal and NDP majority gov can now push through near anything in Canada. I mean, it's crazy what's going on in Canada. It's just beyond crazy what's going on in Canada. But it's crazy what's going on everywhere. I mean, you know, there's this popular military YouTuber in Riga, Latvia, and he was putting out some, I don't know what he was doing before. I guess he was just talking about weapons before, like historical weapons, it sounded like. And he was commenting on the war, and he was taking more of a, pro-Russian tilt. I don't know why, whether that was from bias or whether it was from what he was seeing. At any rate, he was arrested and charged with treason. Okay, Latvia is not even at war. You have people in Russia who do the same thing, and they get fines. I mean, they shouldn't get fines, maybe. You can argue that. But you're gonna get arrested and put in prison for treason, for putting material in your analysis on YouTube. I mean, look, the bottom line here is I just can't stand hearing people in the West talk about, well, Russia's doing this and, it's an authoritarian country. Like, dude, look in the fucking mirror. Look at where we live. Where do we live? Do we live in a place? I mean, America at least has the Constitution, as tattered and beaten up as it is. It at least has some weight left. But if you're outside of America and the West, you don't have any fucking rights at all. You got nothing. If you're not America has this piece of paper that holds up things for now. If you're elsewhere in the West, you got fucking nothing. Zero. They can throw you in prison. They can sign a law. We'll throw you in prison for whatever they want. That's the way it is. That's where we're at. We got no place to throw stones whatsoever. Life savings on Pelosi for next president, 81 on Bedford. Don't do it, man. I'm not the person. Don't do that stuff. Don't do that shit. I learned a lesson not to play with those kind of systems anymore. I won't ever do it again. But I want to get my money back. When Trump comes back, I'm getting my money back. You guys are getting your money back too. Maybe even Salmon will come back here once that stuff gets reversed. If anybody can get in touch with Salmon, get him back over here once everything's been cleared up. I don't want him back now. I want Salmon to come back like the second coming. Everything's sorted and suddenly he shows up again. That's what I'm looking for. Pope consecration of Russia, Ukraine this week. Any significance? I have no idea, man. I have no idea what he's doing. Jews were the chosen people in the beginning. That's part of it. The exile and Zionism after brought corruption into the elite leadership, and that caused real problems later. Yeah, exactly. It's part of the Khazarian compromising. On the COVID front, do you see a greater acknowledgement of the harm and brainwashing that was caused? I do. I'm actually glad you mentioned that because I kind of forgot that topic. You guys saw that Nadal collapsed, where he had to stop. He had some serious chest pains. Another player collapsed on the pitch. It's coming out. I mean, there's a medical practice in Jersey that started to acknowledge it publicly. It's coming out. But it remains to be seen how they're going to manage it. I mean, they will do their little sacrificial lambs. Will they try to bury it more with everything else? I mean, we're at the point where people are really just trying to pretend it's not happening. They're trying to pretend that there's not an 80% increase in deaths between the 20 and 55-year age bracket. But of course it is happening. So, and it's accelerating, to be honest. It's accelerating. So, I do think that I'm certain it's going to come out. I just don't know the mechanism and how it's going to come out. Are they going to try to keep it hidden, or are they going to make it into a big thing and say, we were misled by these people, and then throw a few of theirs under the bus? They've done that quite often. So, Charlie Ward says Obama and Hillary getting COVID is code that they are cooperating with white hats. Oh, man, Charlie Ward. Charlie Ward's great. God, Charlie Ward's fantastic. Charlie Ward's a fucking piece of shit. Charlie Ward's a piece of shit. No, that's not happening. There's no way these people, they're not cooperating with white hats. None of that's happening. It's not happening. Charlie Ward's making stuff up. He takes something, he puts a spin on it because Charlie Ward is a hopium grifter. And he never grifted off of me, although I did listen to him. And over time, you just come to realize that he just makes shit up. He steals material. He has no idea what's going on. Simon Parkes is more interesting because it's not clear whether he's mentally all there. What's going on with him. It's not clear, like, is Charlie Ward... Did Charlie Ward get some people to call Simon Parkes and tell him that they were military? And then Simon Parkes thinks he's getting intel from the military, but he's getting intel from Charlie Ward. I don't know. It's a possibility, to be honest. But, yeah, at any rate, garbage material from these two parties. Don't take any of it seriously. It's all garbage material. And I don't know if it's the fact that they are cooperating with the other side or not. But, you know, there's been a lot of stuff coming out about QFS and quantum financial system. Cliff's been talking about this, and I've heard it from other sources, that QFS is actually more akin to the CBDCs. And that these people have been seeding, basically, you know, that people will accept something that is really just the cabal operating system. And there's been some rumors about, you know, XRP being part of it, which I'm not convinced about. But, you know, I keep an open mind with these kind of things. Remember, Austin Steinbart pushed XRP. Whatever happened with him, what the story was. You know, the reality is that you could see it certainly being the backbone of money transfers in the CBDCs, because we know Swift's collapsing. But could it also be the backbone of financial transfers aside from it? Who knows? I mean, it was listed as being part of the World Economic Forum, so take that for what you will. But it's impossible to know. I mean, I'm going to tell you that, like, it's not financial advice. I'm not selling mine. At the least because even if it is part of the CBDCs, it should pump. Right? It should pump. That's my perspective. Let's keep going. I'm going to go through the comments real quick and stop talking for a second. The Jews went into exile, and the ones that absorbed the Assyrian religious mystical practices bastardized Judaism in a big way. We also make the mistake of thinking people are static in morals and skills. What did Mel Gibson mean by the Jews run Hollywood? I suppose that he was not being very sophisticated about it, because Hollywood's very Khazarian, because these are the people who Hollywood is part of the magician stuff. So he was encountering perhaps some of those people. That's my perspective, at least. So, yeah. Jews who practice actual Old Testament religion are on point. I mean, look, I can tell you that, like, been a huge number of Jews have been against all this stuff. Huge numbers. And I think it's important to identify who the enemies are. And the reality is that they're in every single group and they're in every single race. Heavily in the Anglo-Saxons. I mean, this all goes back to the crown, to Britain. Are you going to say every British, or, you know, every English person is cabal? No, you're not going to say that. You're not going to say that, right? You have these certain groups, these certain tiers that do dirty work, and they work across races. They have their little segments because they're part of a satanic cult. It's the way it is. I'm glad that you found the stream. I'm happy to hear that. 4 juvenile heart attacks per year. The last year, 2,400 juvie heart attack deaths. What changed in the last year, huh? That's wild, Jeff. I had no idea it was that high. Jeff, Cliff High. Yeah, Ascend has it. Yeah, he's great. He's great. Bank of International Settlements seems to like XRP. Yeah. What's my favorite pizza topping? Pat Stedman. Oh, I love the pineapple on the pizza. Pineapple pizza. My favorite topping on pizza is actually olives, probably. If I had to pick a single topping, it would probably be olives. I think olives are great. But I'm actually, if I get pizza, it's either very like classic, simple margarita or like Italian style margarita, or I like more American style supreme, with sausage, pepperoni, peppers, onions, olives, everything. Onions. I hate English people personally. Fuck them. Oh man. How about the Rosicrucians? Well, look, I think that a lot of these groups are very much just semi-sects of each other. Um, I am not going to pretend that I've gone so deep into the exact distinct differences between all of these different groups, but they all talk about very similar things. They all came about at very similar time periods. You know, generally, most of the more esoteric ones were late 1800s to early 1900s. Of course, some went back further into the 1700s. Of course, the Masons, etc. But they all deal with similar esoteric principles and treaties about the nature of reality and how it was different from sort of the Christian nature of reality. I just want to make actually a really quick point on that before I close off this, unless you guys have any more questions, which is that numerology, astrology even, and all of these occult esoteric practices are true. So, but what about the church? Is Jesus, is the Bible, is that true? Yeah, it's also true. So what is the point here? How do these two things work together? And why is it that they seem to have issues with each other, especially the Christians with these other groups? My understanding of it is that the sort of message of Jesus is above everything that happens in the Matrix. And so it's kind of like, don't pay attention or worship anything in this realm. Move yourself to what's beyond it. And so that it helps with the ascension process, the raising of consciousness, the transcending of this reality, ultimately. The idea behind the other things like numerology, astrology, etc., those are all ways of understanding exactly how the matrix works. And so being able to manipulate and use energy within the matrix. And so I think it's important to understand them, but I have enough grounding to know that I don't get distracted by them. I understand that they don't really have power compared to what's above them. This is, by the way, the same reason that all the pagan religions ended up getting conquered, so to speak, and converted to the more monotheistic ones, like Christianity in particular did a really big job in overwhelming those areas, because they actually had more power, to be fair. I mean, that's my understanding of what occurred, is that there was a higher consciousness of those people coming into the pagan realities. But what a lot of Christians don't understand is they think that the pagan stuff wasn't real. It actually was completely real. It's completely real. There are these entities, there are these spirits, there are these things that, pagans prayed to and did sacrifices to, and it actually did yield results. It just didn't yield results compared to what was above it. It's playing a different game, a lower resolution game. And so it's important to remember that. You want to understand how these groups, because they don't go up there, they go in here and they actually master everything here. Which is why like good numerologists like Gary and good astrologists, they understand everything that works in here. The issue is what's going on up here. That's the big question. What's up here is very different than what's down here. And so you can max out here, but you're still not going to get even above that line. So let me see here. Any truth to the biolab in Ukraine hearsay in regards to Russia aiming for U.S. labs located there? I believe that there's lots of truth to that. We haven't seen all of it come out yet, but I think the only question at this point is the details of it, because it's certain that they were there. It's certain that the Bidens were involved with it, and the only question is how bad was it? That's actually the only question. How bad was it? What exactly were they doing? That's what I don't know yet. Any positive religions? I think I'm impartial to Christianity. I think that, Christ measured at a ridiculously high consciousness. But I will say this. I think that every religion is a vector, can be a vector for people. And I also, a lot of Christians today in churches are negative energy, right? They're inverted. They actually yield negative returns in terms of your connection with God, et cetera, et cetera. And as a result, I understand a lot of the return of people to paganism. And I'm not even anti this stuff. I think I'm really are you communicating with the divine? Do you have a method of doing it that resonates with you? That's really what matters the most. That's what matters the most. And I think you can do it from any religion. I have my own personal feelings, but it doesn't really matter. Every religion, except for Satanism, holds key codes to higher consciousness. I think some are faster trips than others. And some are going to be faster for some people than others. Because if you come from a different lineage, it may be very difficult to access God through a different key code. I think that has to do with something with your DNA, to be honest. But I don't know. Anyway. I heard both Russia and China want the gold standard. Also told that it is the beginning of QFS. Curious if that sparks worldwide change. I don't think it's the beginning of QFS. What I think it is what Cliff declared a long time ago, which is that China and Russia, Russia's been prepping for this for a while for its own reasons. China has its own internal economic issues that are about to boil over. This is important to understand, actually. This is a good topic, so I'm happy that you brought this up, Jeff. China was economically in a really fragile state. They've been covering up all these things. Remember all the stuff with Evergrande? And so for them, they needed to save their currency, they needed to move to some sort of gold standard and revalue gold. I actually think the big issues in the economic system are going to happen with some revaluing of Russian and Chinese currency, revaluing how much gold is, because we know that the Western markets have manipulated it. So China's been hoarding gold. We don't know how much. We know Russia's been hoarding a lot of gold. When they finally separate from the Western financial system and they have these other countries kind of linking to their currencies, what's really going to be happening is there's going to be a link to gold. And so it will be the beginning of a gold standard. And it's that's going to tank the value of the dollar and the euro, because they're not going to be tied to a gold standard pretty well. Actually, the Polish zlotys got a good amount of gold behind it, but the Poles maybe knew something. I don't know how they're going to actually play out with all this stuff, because they're still heavily tied to the Eurozone. But at any rate, what we are going to see, I don't think it's like the QFS. I really don't believe in the QFS. I think it's too idealistic that everything's been tagged, and that actually does sound kind of sketchy, that everything's been tagged, and that, what Charlie Ward's saying, that if you do certain things, then you get more money. But then the flip side is that everybody has money, so why would you need to do it? Cliff made that argument. It's quite a logical argument, to be honest. It just sounds like it plays to people's utopian fantasies. I'm always skeptical about that kind of stuff. I do think that we will have a fair economic system in the aftermath of this, but it's not going to be this instantaneous thing where everybody's rich. You're going to make money based on your labor, and it's not going to be stolen from you for the first time ever. And that's really all we can ask for. That you can go and do things for yourself and not have it stolen from you by a bunch of criminals. That would be a fucking utopia, because we could build a crazy world without these parasites. Okay, what do you think will? And by the way, some good comments here from Jeff about um, Christianity and with entities and whatnot. They are 100% real, and they're not necessarily bad, but they're not. They're anywhere from benevolent to negative to neutral. Um, sometimes they'll help you, but the thing about these entities is that there's always a tit for tat with them. So they'll help you, but you have to do something for them to help them. And so it it's I wouldn't say it's necessarily parasitic, but there is an understanding of a relationship between these entities and the individuals, and it's not the same as 5D stuff, right? What do you think will happen when the truth of the cult cabal rule finally breaks through into the mainstream awareness, the event, EBS, etc.? Do you think we will reach a place where everything changes with one breakthrough? I I do think that things are going to change. It's kind of like nothing changes and then it changes faster than we could imagine. But then we adjust to it. And I'll give two examples of this so far. This happened with maybe three even. It happened with COVID. That first month of COVID was wild, right? It was like time slowed down, time dilated. And then we kind of gotten used to this new reality, so to speak. I mean, it's not the future for us. When I say new, the new normal, right? It's not normal. We got used to the way things were going to be, but everything changed. And so we can look back and we can see just how abrupt it was. But we also adjusted to it. You could maybe make some similar arguments with the election, but I think the Russia war was the second biggest one in this recent period. I mean, of course, 9/11 was a big one. Things tend to happen gradually and then all at once. So I think that this year is going to be a lot of these one after another, after another, after another. So we had the war start. It could be like at every 2 months or so, there's another big wham, another big wham. Just as you're getting used to one thing, there's another one. Just as you get used to one thing, there's another one. And it happens and it's so heavy. So how the normies are going to respond to it, I have no idea. I mean, history would indicate a lot of them will pretend that they were never against certain things, and they actually were, but it doesn't really matter what they want to say to themselves. I do think so much changes this year. It's going to be the biggest year of change in our lives. Far bigger than I can explain, because I don't know it. I haven't gone through it yet myself. I just know that it's happening, and we're close to that breakthrough. Why would the Bible warn against listening to astrologists? Is it to keep God, 5D, or to keep people away from these entities? It's because most people who use astrology, not all, but a lot of the traditional uses of astrology were trying to divine future events, and they were using it in the context of trying to base their actions around things that were existing in this matrix. I don't personally believe you have to use it that way. I use it because I think it's a good curiosity, and I think it's very helpful. Paul, I think, is great. Paul's not any sort of dark magician or anything like that, which is why I love his work and I work with him every month. But I will also acknowledge that I don't base my life around what Paul says, right? I don't externalize any of my sovereignty. Like, I look up to God first and foremost, and what he provides to me is an interesting way for me to cross-reference things and to give myself just a heightened awareness. And I also think it's fascinating, but because the planets 100% do exert an influence on us. But yeah, I think for a lot of Christians, especially ones that are more dogmatic, they can't filter out the nuance of it, and they look at it like, if you look at and you see the planets are telling you to do this, that means you're anti-Christian or whatever. I don't know. There's a suspicion, and I think actually it comes from, in many cases, insecurity. Not always, but in many cases, insecurity. So yeah, exactly. I've seen a number of religions that started in prison, predominantly twisting Islam, Nation of Islam, Five Percenters, Nation of Gods on Earth. These are very related to Satanism. Same things apply. Exactly. Go check out the Charlie Ward podcast. Look, I'll tell you this, Charlie. He makes you feel positive for the most part, but it's all just bluster. That's basically it. It's all bluster. So, gotta take it for what it is. Anyway, guys, probably see you next week, but we'll see. Maybe we'll do one more this week. Maybe we'll do a little quick show, do some history. I don't. That's Jose. That's not what was said earlier. That Islam is related to Satanism. He was talking about certain prison sects. Actually, what's kind of interesting is that what you see in Russia is a unification of the Orthodox Christians and the Muslims against a lot of this stuff. So, any religion can get distorted and pulled in that direction. So, all right. I'll see you guys. Much love and take care.